He froze her card right as the waiter announced the total, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. His mother smiled. His mistress watched with quiet amusement. "Go ahead," Ethan said, expecting his wife to finally admit she needed him. But Naomi Hayes did not panic. She knew the account he had just locked was connected to something far bigger than he imagined. The man trying to make her feel powerless had no idea who truly held the power. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hours earlier, everything had still looked like a celebration. The Magnolia House was the kind of restaurant where people came to be seen. The lighting was warm, the tables were perfectly arranged, and every detail suggested success. It was where executives celebrated promotions, where business deals were quietly discussed, and where people measured each other by the company they kept. Tonight was supposed to be about Ethan Cole. After years of chasing recognition at his investment firm, Ethan had finally earned the promotion he wanted. Senior leadership had noticed him. His title had changed. His office was moving to a better floor. For the first time in years, he felt like he had become the man he always believed he was meant to be. And Naomi Hayes had been the person standing beside him through all of it. For 12 years of marriage, she had supported Ethan in ways most people never saw. She remembered important meetings. She handled details he forgot. She encouraged him through failures when nobody else believed in him. But over time, Ethan stopped seeing those things as sacrifices. He started seeing them as expectations. To him, Naomi was simply his wife who stayed home, managed their quiet life, and avoided the spotlight. She wore simple clothes. She preferred small gatherings over expensive events. She never talked about money, achievements, or status, and that was exactly why people underestimated her. Ethan's mother, Victoria Cole, had never hidden her opinion. She believed Naomi was the reason Ethan had not moved faster in life. "You're finally entering a different world," Victoria had told him months earlier. "You need someone who understands ambition." Ethan never defended Naomi the way he used to. That was the part that hurt the most. Tonight, when Naomi entered the restaurant wearing a simple dark dress, Victoria looked her over with disappointment. "That's what you chose for your husband's promotion dinner?" she asked. Her tone sounded casual, but everyone at the table understood the message. Naomi smiled politely. "It's Ethan's night. I wanted him to enjoy it." Victoria shook her head slightly. "That's exactly the problem. You always disappear into the background." Naomi did not respond. She had learned that some people were not looking for an answer. They were looking for a reaction. Across the table, Ethan noticed everything. He noticed his mother's comments. He noticed Naomi staying quiet, but instead of protecting his wife, he looked away. Then Lena Parker arrived. She was one of Ethan's colleagues at the firm. Confident, polished, and completely comfortable around powerful people. She walked into the restaurant like she belonged there, and Ethan's entire expression changed. Naomi noticed immediately. The smile he used to save for her was now directed at someone else. "Lena," Ethan said warmly. "Glad you could make it." "I didn't know," looked at him. Ethan gave a small shrug. "It's a business celebration." "She's part of the reason this promotion happened." Lena sat beside him, not across from him, beside him. And nobody at the table seemed surprised. That was when Naomi understood something she had already suspected. The late nights, the private phone calls, the sudden changes in Ethan's behavior. She had known. She just had not wanted to believe it. For years, Naomi had chosen patience over confrontation, not because she was weak, but because she wanted to see the truth clearly before making a decision. Now she was seeing it. The woman Ethan was replacing her with was sitting at the same table where everyone was celebrating him. Dinner continued, but the mood changed. Every comment became sharper. Victoria praised Lena's career. "You can tell when someone has ambition," she said. Lena smiled. "I think people naturally end up where they belong." The words were polite. But Naomi understood what they meant. She was being reminded that everyone at that table believed she belonged beneath them. Still, Naomi remained calm. She answered questions respectfully. She did not create a scene. She did not expose what she knew, because there was something Ethan had never understood about her. Silence was not surrender. Sometimes silence was the moment someone stopped explaining themselves to people who had already decided not to listen. As dessert arrived, Naomi's phone briefly lit up beside her plate. A message appeared from a number saved under a private contact. Quarterly approval is ready. Awaiting your confirmation before release. Naomi looked at the screen for only a second before turning it face down. Nobody noticed. Nobody except the restaurant manager. When he walked past their table, his expression changed slightly when he saw her. Not recognition, exactly, more like respect. A quiet acknowledgement that did not match the way everyone else treated her. Naomi noticed, but she said nothing. Then the waiter arrived with the check. Ethan leaned back in his chair. A small smile appeared on his face. Actually, he said, looking around the table, Naomi can take care of this one. The conversation stopped. She handles the household expenses, he added. It sounded like a joke, but it was not. Naomi slowly reached into her purse and placed her card on the tray. She already knew something was wrong. Ethan watched the waiter walk away, and for the first time that night, Naomi saw exactly what he wanted. He wanted her embarrassed. He wanted everyone to see her as powerless. A few moments later, the waiter returned. His expression was uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Mom. The card was declined. Ethan leaned forward. Declined? His voice was louder than necessary. Naomi looked at him. There was no surprise on her face. That bothered him. Maybe you should call the bank, Ethan said with a smile. Or maybe explain to everyone what happened. Victoria covered a laugh. Lena looked down, hiding her amusement. Around them, strangers began paying attention. The room slowly became quiet. But Naomi did not move. She simply looked at her husband, the man who thought he had finally proven she needed him. And then the restaurant manager appeared beside her. Mom, he said softly. The way he said it was different. Not dismissive, not casual, respectful. Naomi looked up at him, and for the first time that night, Ethan noticed something he could not explain. Why did the manager of one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city speak to his wife like she was someone important? The manager stood beside Naomi's chair for only a few seconds. But those seconds were enough to make Ethan uncomfortable. He had expected embarrassment. He had expected his wife to look nervous, to apologize, maybe even to ask him for help. Instead, Naomi looked calm. That bothered him more than the declined card itself. Is there a problem? Ethan asked, trying to sound amused. The manager glanced briefly at Naomi before answering. There seems to have been a misunderstanding with the payment system. I'll take care of it. The words were polite, but Ethan noticed something strange. The manager was not speaking to him. He was speaking to Naomi. Naomi simply nodded. Thank you. Please handle it quietly. The manager lowered his head slightly and stepped away. For a moment, nobody at the table spoke. Then Victoria laughed softly. Always so dramatic, and she said, Even the staff knows how to treat you better than you treat yourself. It was meant to be an insult. Naomi understood that. She also understood something else. The people at the table were not seeing what was happening. They were seeing the version of her they had created in their minds. A quiet wife, a woman without ambition, someone who depended on her husband, someone who had nothing to offer except support. Naomi looked across the table at Ethan. The man sitting there was not the same person she had married. Years ago, Ethan had been different. He had been humble. He had been grateful. He had listened when she spoke. Now every compliment he received seemed to erase the people who helped him get there. Especially her. The waiter returned a few minutes later with confirmation that the bill had been handled. Naomi did not ask questions. She did not explain anything. That silence confused Ethan. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to defend herself so he could dismiss her. But Naomi gave him nothing. The dinner ended shortly afterward. Outside the restaurant, the cold evening air followed them into the parking area. Ethan walked ahead with Lena while Victoria and the others followed behind. Naomi stayed a few steps back, not because she was weak, because she needed a moment to accept what she had already known. Her marriage had changed. The hardest part was not the embarrassment. It was realizing Ethan had not been trying to protect their relationship. He had been trying to prove he no longer needed her. When they reached the cars, Ethan finally turned around. "You could have handled that better." Naomi looked at him. "Handled what?" "The card situation." She studied his face. "You froze the account." For a brief, Ethan's expression changed, only slightly, but she noticed. "You're making assumptions," he said. "No," Naomi replied quietly. "I'm not." The confidence in her voice unsettled him. For years, Ethan had been used to Naomi avoiding conflict. He expected her to soften difficult conversations. He expected her to make things easier. Tonight was different. "You embarrassed yourself," he said. The sentence landed harder than he probably intended. Naomi felt the pain, but she did not let him see it. She simply opened her car door. "I think we both know who was trying to embarrass someone tonight." Ethan stared at her. For the first time, he did not have an immediate answer. Then Lena called his name from the other car. The moment disappeared. Ethan walked away. Naomi watched him leave with the same woman who had been sitting beside him at dinner. She did not cry. She did not chase him. Instead, she sat in her car and took out her phone. There were dozens of messages waiting. Most were from business contacts, people who knew her under a different name, people who understood the decisions she made and the responsibilities she carried. One message stood out. "Board members have reviewed the acquisition documents. Final approval requires your confirmation." Naomi read it carefully. Then she locked her phone. This was why she had never told Ethan everything. Not because she wanted to play games, not because she enjoyed keeping secrets. She had seen what money did to people. She had seen how quickly respect could disappear when someone thought they had nothing to gain. When she married Ethan, she wanted to know whether he loved Naomi Hayes or the influence attached to her name. So she built a quiet life, a normal life. She let him believe she was simply the woman who supported him, but somewhere along the way, Ethan stopped appreciating the woman beside him. He started measuring her worth by what she could display, and now she was seeing the result. The next morning, Naomi woke up early. She made coffee. She reviewed the messages she had received. She checked the financial reports, waiting for her approval. There was no panic. There was no revenge plan. Only decisions. She had spent years protecting Ethan's confidence. Now she needed to protect herself. Later that morning, Ethan arrived home wearing the same expression he had carried after the dinner. Confidence. Certainty. Like he believed the situation had already been decided. "We need to talk," he said. Naomi looked up from the documents on the table. She noticed something immediately. The folder in his hand, the serious expression, the way he avoided looking directly at her. Ethan placed it down between them. And Naomi already knew this conversation was not going to be about the restaurant, because the man who had tried to make her feel powerless the night before had come home carrying papers that would change everything. Ethan placed the folder on the kitchen table and sat across from Naomi like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of a conversation with his wife. The house felt different. Only a few hours earlier, they had been under the same roof as a married couple. Now, the space between them felt like a negotiation room. Naomi looked at the folder but did not touch it. "What is this?" Ethan leaned back. "I think we both know where this is going." His voice was calm, but not kind. That was what hurt the most. He was not angry. He was not confused. He had already made his decision. "I've been thinking about our future," he continued, "and I don't think we want the same things anymore." Naomi studied him quietly. For years, she had been the person who searched for solutions when things became difficult. She had been the one who encouraged conversations, repaired arguments, and reminded Ethan that marriage was supposed to be a partnership. But Ethan was no longer looking for a solution. He was looking for an exit. "You mean you don't think I fit into the life you want anymore?" Naomi said. Ethan avoided her eyes for a moment. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." The silence that followed told her enough. Ethan had always been ambitious. Naomi knew that better than anyone. She had watched him struggle, watched him doubt himself, watched him chase opportunities that seemed impossible. But somewhere along the way, ambition became entitlement. He stopped seeing success as something they built together. He started seeing it as something he earned alone. "You've changed," Ethan said. Naomi almost smiled. The irony was not lost on her. She had changed, but not in the way he believed. She had become more careful, more observant, more aware of how people behaved when they thought there was nothing to gain from kindness. "I've been the same person for 12 years, she replied. Ethan looked frustrated. "This is exactly what I mean. You always make everything emotional." Naomi looked down at the folder. She finally opened it. Divorce papers. The sight still hurt even though part of her had expected it. Knowing something was coming did not make it painless. She turned each page slowly. Ethan watched her reaction. He seemed to expect tears, an argument, a desperate attempt to save the marriage. But Naomi gave him none of those things. "You already spoke with an attorney," she said. "Yes." "When?" "A while ago." A while ago. Those words stayed with her, not because he wanted a divorce, because he had been planning a life without her while still accepting everything she gave him. Naomi closed the folder. "Is Lena part of this decision?" Ethan's expression tightened. "Don't do this. That wasn't an answer. She has nothing to do with this." Naomi looked at him. She had learned something important about people. Sometimes their first instinct was not honesty, it was defense, and Ethan had defended Lena faster than he had defended his own wife. "I see," Naomi said. Ethan stood up. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Naomi. I just think we've reached the point where we need different things." Different things. That was the phrase people used when they wanted to make betrayal sound reasonable. Naomi looked around the kitchen. This was the room where they had planned their future. The room where she had sat with Ethan during difficult years and told him he was capable of more. Now he stood there acting as if she had been holding him back. "I need some space," Ethan said. "You should think about what you want." Naomi almost asked him what he thought she had been doing all these years. But she stopped herself, because she finally understood. He was not asking for space. He was preparing for her absence. After Ethan left the room, Naomi remained at the table. She did not break down. Instead, she picked up her phone and opened a secure application. Her personal accounts, her company files, the information Ethan had never asked about. Not once. That was the part she could never understand. He had spent years complaining that she was not ambitious enough, yet he had never once asked what she actually did with her time. He never wondered why certain business people respected her opinion. He never questioned why she understood financial reports better than most executives. He had decided who she was before he ever bothered to know her. A notification appeared. A message from Daniel Reed, one of the senior legal advisors who handled her private business matters. "Naomi, I reviewed the situation. Your personal assets remain protected under the existing agreements. However, given the circumstances, I recommend we prepare for possible disclosure if negotiations become complicated." Naomi read the message twice. She knew this moment might come. Her hidden identity had always been protected by structure, not luck. Separate names, separate legal entities, careful planning. She had built a life where Ethan could never claim he had been deceived financially. But she also knew something else. Once the truth came out, there would be no going back. People treated you differently when they knew your bank balance. That was exactly why she had never wanted Ethan to know. She wanted to know whether he loved Naomi Hayes, not the woman behind the accounts. The next day, Ethan acted like the decision was already final. He spoke to his mother, he spoke to Lena, and Naomi noticed something that confirmed what she feared. They were not discussing whether the marriage could be saved. They were discussing how quickly she could be replaced. Victoria called that evening. Naomi answered. "I heard about the divorce," Victoria said. There was no sadness in her voice, only relief. "I think this is for the best. Ethan needs someone who understands where he is going." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. After 12 years, Victoria still saw her as an obstacle, not a person. "I hope Ethan finds what he's looking for," Naomi said. Victoria seemed surprised by the calm response. "You're taking this better than I expected." Naomi looked at the divorce papers sitting on the table. "No," she said quietly. "I'm just done fighting for someone who already chose to leave." After the call ended, Naomi made a decision. Not an emotional one, a necessary one. She opened a private contact list and selected a name she had not needed to call in years. A person who knew the truth. A person who understood the company Ethan had never known existed. When the call connected, Naomi spoke only one sentence. I need you to prepare the documents. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure you want to do this? Naomi looked at the divorce papers in front of her. Then she looked at the wedding ring still on her hand. Yes, she said. Schedule the review meeting. And this time, the meeting would not be about saving her marriage. It would be about protecting everything Ethan never knew she controlled. The next morning, Ethan woke up believing he had finally taken control. That was what he told himself. The divorce papers were signed on his side. The conversation had gone exactly how he expected. Naomi had not screamed, threatened, or created a scene. To Ethan, that meant she had accepted reality. He did not understand that Naomi's silence was not acceptance. It was observation. At the office, Ethan moved through the building with a new confidence. He had spent months trying to position himself as someone ready for a bigger role, someone who belonged among executives and decision-makers. Now he felt closer than ever. The promotion had changed the way people treated him. Colleagues congratulated him. His name appeared in internal announcements. His new title gave him access to meetings he had wanted for years. And with every compliment, Ethan became more convinced that the old version of his life had been holding him back, including Naomi. During lunch, Lena sat across from him at a private table near the office. You look relieved, she said. Ethan smiled. I am because of the divorce, because I'm finally being honest with myself. Lena tilted her head. And what does that mean? Ethan looked out the window. It means I spent too many years trying to make something work that was never right. He did not mention the years Naomi supported him. He did not mention the nights she stayed awake helping him prepare presentations. He did not mention that when nobody else believed in him, she was the person who did. People often remembered the moment they succeeded. They forgot the people who stood beside them before success arrived. Lena reached across the table and touched his hand. You deserve someone who matches where you're going. Ethan smiled. That sentence was exactly what he wanted to hear. Back at home, Naomi was doing something very different. She was not preparing revenge. She was preparing clarity. She sat at the dining table, surrounded by documents, not because she needed to prove anything to Ethan, but because she needed to protect herself. Her attorney had reviewed the situation carefully. The divorce process would take time. Assets would need to be evaluated properly. Any agreements would need to follow the laws of their state. There would be no dramatic shortcut, no single document that magically solved everything. Naomi preferred it that way. She had spent years building everything carefully. She would not destroy that discipline by acting emotionally. A message arrived from her legal advisor. Ethan has requested a preliminary financial disclosure discussion. We should prepare. Naomi read the message quietly. This was the moment she had expected. Sooner or later, Ethan would start asking questions. Questions he should have asked years ago. Who was Naomi Hayes? What did she actually do? Why did certain people return her calls immediately? Why did executives who barely knew Ethan always seem to respect her? But Ethan had never been curious. He had been comfortable with the version of Naomi that benefited him. That was the part she struggled with most. Not the divorce. Not Lena. Not even the humiliation. It was realizing that the man she loved had never truly tried to understand her. That afternoon, Victoria arrived unexpectedly. Naomi opened the door and immediately knew why she was there. Victoria was not carrying concern. She was carrying confidence. I think we should talk, Victoria said. Naomi stepped aside and let her enter. They sat in the living room. Victoria looked around like she was already imagining the space without Naomi in it. Ethan told me everything. Naomi stayed quiet. He's under a lot of pressure right now, Victoria continued. His career is finally moving forward, and he needs peace. Naomi looked at her. Peace? Victoria nodded. You have to understand, Naomi. Some people grow apart. Naomi almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. For years, Victoria had avoided saying what she really thought. Now that Ethan was successful, she felt free to say it. I supported him when nobody knew his name, Naomi said calmly. Victoria's expression barely changed. And I'm sure you did. But support is not the same as being the right person for someone's future. The words were carefully chosen. That made them worse. Naomi realized Victoria was not just accepting the divorce. She believed Naomi had lost her place, like a person's value could disappear the moment someone else became more successful. "I hope Ethan finds happiness," Naomi said. Victoria looked surprised. "You're not angry?" Naomi paused. She had every reason to be angry, but anger was not going to decide her next move. "I'm disappointed," Naomi answered. That was the truth. After Victoria left, Naomi stood alone in the quiet house. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to admit something. She had spent too much time proving she could be patient. Now she needed to prove she could choose herself. That evening, Ethan called. She almost ignored it, but she answered. "We need to discuss the financial side of this," he said. Naomi listened. "I want everything handled fairly." She noticed the confidence in his voice. He still believed he understood the situation. "I agree," she said. Ethan sounded relieved. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." Naomi looked at the secure folder on her desk. Inside were records Ethan had never seen. Ownership documents, corporate structures, approvals, the pieces of a life he never bothered to discover. "I'll have my representative contact yours," she said. There was a brief silence. "Your representative?" "Yes." Ethan laughed lightly. "Naomi, we don't need to make this more complicated than it is." She looked at the papers in front of her. For the first time, she heard how small his understanding of her life really was. "It won't be complicated," she said. "It will just be accurate." After the call ended, Naomi opened the email that had arrived earlier that day. It was from the executive office of the company she had quietly built. The subject line contained only a few words. "Board meeting confirmation required." She clicked the message, and when she saw the date, the location, and the names of the people attending, she knew the time for staying invisible was almost over. Ethan believed the hardest part was already over. He had expected Naomi to fight. He had expected anger, accusations, maybe even an attempt to stop the divorce. Instead, she had calmly accepted the conversation and contacted her own representative. To Ethan, that felt like confirmation that he had made the right decision. He told himself Naomi understood the situation. She knew she could not compete with the life he was building. At least, that was the story he wanted to believe. The truth was much harder for him to accept. Naomi was not losing control. She was preparing to take it back. A week passed after Ethan delivered the divorce papers. During that time, he became more distant than ever. He spent most evenings with Lena, who no longer tried to hide her presence in his life. She attended company events with him. She appeared beside him at dinners. She spoke about his future as if she had already earned a place in it, and Ethan allowed it. One evening, he came home late and found Naomi sitting at the dining table reviewing documents. "You're still here," he said. The words were simple, but Naomi heard the meaning behind them. Ethan no longer saw their home as something they shared. He saw it as something he would eventually take back. "I live here," Naomi replied. For now, the sentence was colder than he probably intended. Naomi looked at him carefully. There was a time when those words would have broken her. Now they only confirmed what she already knew. "You want me to leave?" Ethan sighed. "I think it's better for both of us." Naomi closed the folder in front of her. "And where exactly am I supposed to go?" Ethan looked surprised by the question, not because he cared, because he assumed the answer was obvious. "You'll figure it out." That was the moment Naomi understood how far he had changed. The man who once promised they would face everything together was now comfortable watching her face uncertainty alone. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Ethan frowned. He expected resistance. "Okay?" "Yes." Her calm response made him uncomfortable. "You're not going to argue?" "No." "Why?" Naomi looked at him. "Because I can't convince someone to value me." The answer stayed with him longer than he wanted. But instead of reflecting, Ethan became defensive. "You always make yourself sound like the victim." Naomi almost responded. She could have listed every sacrifice, every time she stood beside him, every opportunity she quietly helped create, but she stopped. People who refused to see your value rarely changed because you gave them more evidence. Sometimes they only understood after they lost access to what they ignored. The next day, Ethan arrived with a moving kamami scheduled, not to remove Naomi completely, not yet. He wanted control. He wanted the process to happen on his terms. Lena arrived with him. That was the part Naomi found hardest to accept, not because Lena was there, Because Ethan no longer seemed embarrassed, he introduced her like she belonged. "My mother thinks this is the right step," Ethan said. Naomi looked at him. "Your mother is moving my things now?" Ethan avoided the question. "This is complicated." "No," Naomi said quietly. "It isn't." The room became silent. For years, Naomi had avoided confrontation because she wanted peace. But peace was not the same as pretending nothing was wrong. She walked toward the closet and removed a small box. Inside were personal documents, family records, and a few items she wanted to protect. Ethan noticed. "What's that?" "Private documents." "Anything related to our finances?" Naomi looked at him. The question revealed more than he realized. He still believed he understood her financial position. He still believed there was nothing important there. "Some things are personal," she said. Ethan shook his head. "This is exactly why we're here. You've always been secretive." Naomi almost smiled. Secretive. That word was interesting coming from him. She had hidden her success because she wanted a real marriage. Ethan had hidden his betrayal because he wanted freedom. There was a difference. After Lena left the room to take a phone call, Ethan lowered his voice. "I'm trying to make this easy." Naomi looked at him. "No, Ethan, you're trying to make this convenient." He had no answer, because she was right. Later that evening, Naomi met privately with her attorney. They reviewed the next steps. The divorce would require disclosures. SATs would be examined. Business interests would be properly separated. Everything would follow procedure. Her attorney looked through the documents carefully. "There is something we need to discuss," he said. Naomi looked up. "What is it?" "Ethan's team believes this is a simple marital asset discussion." Naomi stayed quiet. "And? They don't know the full structure of your holdings." She looked toward the window. The city lights reflected across the glass. "That was intentional." Her attorney nodded. "I understand why. But once financial discovery begins, questions may come." Naomi knew. The longer Ethan believed she was powerless, the more confident he became. And confidence made people careless. That was the dangerous part. When Naomi returned home, she found an envelope waiting on the table. It was from Ethan's attorney. She opened it. Inside was a formal request for financial disclosures. Naomi read every page. Then she noticed something attached behind it. A handwritten note from Ethan. It was short, almost casual. "Let's keep this simple. You'll walk away with what's fair." Naomi stared at the sentence. Not because she was offended, because she finally saw the full picture. Ethan still thought he was the person deciding what she deserved. She placed the note down. Then her phone rang. The caller ID showed a name Ethan had never seen before. "A senior executive from the company Naomi secretly controlled," she answered. "Naomi," the voice said carefully, "the board has reviewed the situation. They want to know if you are prepared to authorize the next step." Naomi looked at Ethan's divorce papers sitting on the table. Then she looked at the financial disclosure request he had sent. For months, Ethan had believed he was leaving behind a powerless wife. He had no idea he was about to negotiate with the person who had the authority to decide far more than he ever imagined. Naomi took a slow breath. "Yes," she said. "Schedule the meeting." Naomi arrived at the office before sunrise. It was not a place most people would recognize as connected to her. There was no name on the building that revealed her role. No public announcement, no photographs of her on the walls. That was exactly how she wanted it. For years, Naomi had built everything quietly. She entered through a private elevator and walked into a conference room where 3 people were already waiting. Daniel Reed, her longtime legal advisor, stood first. "Good morning, Naomi," she nodded. "Morning." The others followed. They were executives, people who managed billions of dollars in assets, people who negotiated major financial agreements and made decisions that affected entire markets. But when Naomi entered the room, they did not see the quiet housewife Ethan thought he knew. They saw the person who had approved their biggest decisions. The difference was something Naomi had always protected, not because she enjoyed having power, because she knew what happened when people saw only power. They stopped seeing the person. Daniel placed a folder on the table. "We reviewed Ethan's disclosure request and the current divorce situation." Naomi opened it. "The important thing is that we stay professional," she said. Daniel nodded. "That has always been your position." She looked through the documents. There were no emotional reactions, no anger, only focus. She had spent years building a company while keeping her personal life separate from it. Her holdings were structured carefully. Her ownership was protected through legal entities and agreements created long before Ethan ever knew what they meant. But now, because of the divorce process, those worlds were beginning to move closer together, and Ethan had no idea. "He believes I have very little," Naomi said. Daniel looked at her. "He appears confident." Naomi gave a small, tired smile. That has always been his problem. She did not say it with bitterness. She said it with disappointment. Because Ethan's confidence had not come from understanding. It came from assumption. He assumed the quiet woman beside him had no influence because she never demanded attention. He assumed simplicity meant weakness. He assumed silence meant surrender. That morning, Naomi reviewed the next steps. No dramatic moves. No public exposure. No unnecessary damage. She only wanted the truth handled properly. After the meeting, she received another message. The bank division had finalized preparation for the upcoming review. The same bank where Ethan had frozen her card. The same institution where he thought he had embarrassed her. Naomi stared at the message for several seconds. The irony was not lost on her. But she did not smile. The memory still hurt. Because the painful part was never the card, it was the intention behind it. Ethan had wanted to make her feel small. He had wanted other people to believe she had nothing. And that was the one thing Naomi could not ignore. Later that afternoon, Ethan met with his attorney. He walked in expecting a simple conversation, a discussion about dividing assets, a conversation where he believed he had the advantage. His attorney reviewed the documents. "Your wife's representative is requesting a formal review of all financial information." Ethan leaned back. "That's normal." "Yes," the attorney replied. "But there are some unusual points." "What kind of points?" The attorney looked through the file. "Her financial records are more complicated than expected." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means there are multiple entities and investment structures involved." Ethan laughed. "Naomi?" The idea sounded impossible to him. "She doesn't have anything like that." His attorney did not answer immediately. That silence bothered him. "What?" "I'm saying we should not make assumptions before reviewing everything." Ethan felt irritated. For years, he had been the person everyone looked to for answers. Now someone was suggesting he did not know his own wife. "That doesn't make sense," Ethan said. His attorney simply closed the folder. Then the review should clarify things. Ethan left the office unsettled, but instead of questioning himself, he blamed Naomi. He convinced himself she was making the divorce complicated, that she was hiding information, that she was trying to gain leverage. He never considered the possibility that she had been living an entire life he had never bothered to understand. That evening, Lena noticed his mood. "You seem distracted." Ethan poured himself a drink. "My attorney says Naomi's finances are more complicated than expected." Lena laughed softly. "Complicated?" She shook her head. "Ethan, she stayed home. She managed the house. That doesn't sound complicated." Those words comforted him, because they matched what he wanted to believe. A person's value was easier to ignore when everyone around you agreed to ignore it. The next day, Naomi received confirmation. The review meeting had been scheduled. Location: Sterling Heights Financial Center. The headquarters of the bank Ethan had unknowingly depended on. The message included the names of attendees: executives, legal representatives, board members, and Ethan Cole. Naomi read his name carefully. She knew this meeting would change everything. Not because she wanted him to feel embarrassed, not because she wanted revenge. Because Ethan needed to finally understand the difference between being supported and being entitled. Before leaving, Naomi opened a drawer in her office. Inside was a simple item she had kept for years. Not a luxury watch, not jewelry, not anything that showed wealth. It was a small reminder of who she was before anyone judged her. She placed it back carefully. Then she picked up her phone. A message arrived from Daniel. "The board is ready. They will recognize your authority during the meeting." Naomi looked at the screen. For years, Ethan had believed he was the one deciding her future. Soon, he would walk into a room where everyone knew the truth he had never asked to learn. and the first thing he would see when the doors opened would not be money. It would be respect. Ethan arrived at Sterling Heights believing he was walking into a negotiation. He wore his most expensive suit, the same suit he had bought after receiving his promotion, the same suit he believed represented the person he had become. Lena walked beside him, confident and composed. She had insisted on coming because, as she told him, he needed someone on his side. Victoria came too. She wanted to see the end of Naomi's marriage. For years she had believed Naomi was the reason Ethan had not reached his full potential. She thought this meeting would prove that her son had finally chosen the right path. None of them understood what kind of room they were about to enter. The building itself did not impress Ethan. He had visited corporate offices before. He had attended executive meetings. He knew how powerful people looked and acted, so when they entered the lobby, he walked with confidence. A receptionist greeted them immediately. "Good morning." Ethan smiled. "We're here for the settlement meeting." The receptionist looked at the appointment schedule. "Yes, the meeting is prepared." She paused briefly. Then she looked toward Naomi, who had just entered behind them. The change was subtle, but Ethan noticed it. The receptionist's expression shifted. Not surprise, respect. "Good morning, Miss Hayes." Naomi nodded. "Good morning." Ethan looked between them. He noticed the greeting, but he dismissed it. He assumed Naomi had simply become familiar with someone during the process. That was easier to believe. The elevator ride was quiet. Victoria stood beside Lena, whispering softly. "I still can't believe she made this so complicated." Lena smiled. "Some people have a hard time accepting when a chapter ends." Naomi heard them. She said nothing. She had learned something important over the years. People often revealed themselves most clearly when they believed they were winning. The elevator doors opened. The top floor was different from the rest of the building. The atmosphere changed immediately. Employees stopped talking when Naomi walked by. Not because they were afraid, because they respected her. Ethan noticed. Again. But again he explained it away. Maybe she had arranged something. Maybe this was part of her attempt to look more important than she really was. He still could not see what was directly in front of him. The conference room was large. Glass walls overlooked the city. Several executives were already inside. Lawyers, board representatives, senior financial officers. Ethan recognized some names, people he had only seen in business publications. He felt slightly uncomfortable. This was more formal than he expected. He turned to his attorney. "Why are they here?" His attorney lowered his voice. "I assumed this involved more than a simple divorce discussion." Ethan frowned. More than a simple divorce discussion. The phrase bothered him, because he was beginning to realize he might not understand the situation as well as he thought. Naomi entered last. Everyone stood. Not some of them, everyone. The room became completely still. Ethan stopped walking. For a moment, he thought there had been a mistake. Maybe they were greeting someone behind her. Maybe another executive was entering. But nobody moved. Nobody looked away from Naomi. She walked toward the table calmly. No expensive jewelry, no dramatic entrance, no attempt to prove anything. She simply took her seat. Ethan stared. "That's your seat?" The question escaped before he could stop himself. Naomi looked at him. "Yes." He gave a small laugh. A nervous laugh. "This is some kind of misunderstanding." Nobody responded. That silence made him more uncomfortable. A man with silver hair stepped forward. His name was Richard Hale, the chairman of the financial group. Ethan recognized him immediately. Richard was known throughout the industry. A man who rarely appeared publicly. A man who made decisions behind closed doors. "Everyone," Richard said, "before we begin, there is something that needs to be understood." Ethan crossed his arms. He still believed there was an explanation. Richard looked toward Naomi. "This meeting is taking place because Ms. Naomi Hayes requested a formal review." Ethan looked at Naomi. Requested. Not attended. Not invited. Requested. The difference was small. But it changed everything. Richard continued. "For those unfamiliar with her role, Ms. Hayes has been involved with this institution for many years." Ethan's expression changed slightly. "Involved?" Richard nodded. "Yes." Naomi remained quiet. She did not need to defend herself. The room already knew. Ethan looked around. He searched for someone who appeared confused, someone who looked like they were waiting for an explanation. Nobody did. That was when uncertainty finally entered his mind. The woman he thought spent her days at home. The woman he thought depended on him. The woman he believed had nothing beyond their marriage. Everyone in this room treated her like she mattered. His attorney opened a folder and began reviewing the documents. Ethan watched Naomi carefully. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had misunderstood everything, not just the divorce. Everything. Richard placed a document on the table. We can proceed with the financial review now. Ethan looked down. The first page contained information he did not recognize. Company names, ownership structures, investment records. His eyes moved faster, then slower, because one name appeared repeatedly. Naomi Hayes. His face tightened. What is this? Nobody looked at him calmly, and for the first time since their marriage began, Ethan looked at her not as his wife, but as someone he had never truly known. The room remained silent, not the uncomfortable silence Ethan was used to after an argument. This was different. This was the kind of silence that came when everyone else already understood something he had not. Richard Hale looked toward the documents in front of Ethan. Before we continue, I believe there are some things that need clarification. Ethan looked at Naomi. She was sitting across from him, calm and composed. The same woman he had watched make coffee every morning. The same woman he had criticized for wearing simple clothes and living quietly. But the people in this room did not look at her that way. They looked at her like she was the person everyone answered to. Naomi, Ethan said slowly, what is going on? For the first time in years, he sounded uncertain. Naomi did not look away. You wanted a fair financial review. Yes, that is what we are doing. Ethan shook his head. No, this is something else. Richard stepped forward. Mr. Cole, I understand this may be difficult to process. Difficult. That word bothered Ethan. Because he did not want to process it. He wanted an explanation that would return everything to the version he understood. Richard opened a folder. 11 years ago, Naomi Hayes became involved in several strategic acquisitions through a private holding structure. Ethan frowned. Acquisitions? Yes, Richard continued calmly. She built a financial group by investing in undervalued institutions and restructuring them over time. Ethan looked at Naomi. You never told me about this. Naomi held his gaze. You never asked. The answer hit harder than he expected, because it was true. There had been hundreds of moments when he could have asked, when she stayed late reviewing documents, when she received calls during dinner, when executives thanked her for decisions he did not understand. He always assumed those things were small, because he had already decided who Naomi was. Richard placed another document on the table. This company eventually became Eastgate Holdings. Ethan stared at the name. He had heard of Eastgate. Everyone in his industry had. It was one of the most influential private financial groups in the region, but he had never connected it to Naomi, because the idea was impossible in his mind. His wife could not be the person behind something that powerful. She was supposed to be ordinary, Richard continued. Eastgate Holdings became the majority owner of Sterling Financial Group, including this bank. The room was completely still. Ethan looked around. Nobody looked surprised, because they already knew. Lena's expression had changed. The confidence she arrived with was gone. Victoria sat frozen beside her. For years, she had spoken about Naomi as if she were an inconvenience, a woman who had no ambition, a woman who had nothing to contribute. Now she was sitting in a room where everyone treated Naomi with respect. Ethan's face tightened. This isn't possible. Naomi looked at him. Why? He struggled to answer. Because the truth was not that it was impossible. The truth was that he never imagined it. You never worked, he said. The sentence came out before he could stop it. The room became even quieter. Naomi looked at him for a moment. Then she spoke. I worked every day. Her voice remained calm. I just wasn't working for your approval. Ethan looked down. That sentence stayed with him because it challenged everything he believed. He had measured work by titles, by offices, by public recognition. Naomi had measured it by results. Richard continued explaining the structure. There were no magical documents, no instant transfer of power, no dramatic announcement that erased years of history. Just facts, ownership records, corporate filings, investment agreements, a carefully built financial history. The truth was not created in that room. It had existed long before Ethan did discover it. The hardest part for Ethan was not learning that Naomi had money. It was learning that she had never needed him to validate her. He remembered every time he complained about carrying the marriage. Every time he suggested she did not understand pressure. Every time he acted as if he was the only person building a future. And now he was sitting across from the person who had been building one all along. Lena finally spoke. "So, what does this mean?" Nobody answered her immediately, because even she understood the question was bigger than money. It meant the woman she had tried to replace was not powerless. It meant Ethan's entire argument about Naomi holding him back had been built on a false assumption. Naomi looked at the divorce documents. Then she looked at Ethan. "You wanted to separate our lives because you thought I had nothing." Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "At dinner, you froze my card because you wanted me to feel small." Her voice remained steady. "You wanted everyone watching to believe I needed you." Ethan looked away, because now he understood the cruel irony. The account he froze, the bank he embarrassed her through, the financial system he thought gave him power. It all connected back to her, Naomi continued. "I never needed you to know what I built." She paused. "But I needed to know who you were when you thought I had nothing." That was the moment Ethan finally understood. The divorce was not the reason he was losing her. The divorce was the result of what he had already chosen. Richard closed the folder. The next step will involve reviewing the financial implications of the separation. Ethan looked at Naomi. The woman sitting across from him was no longer the person he thought he was leaving behind. She was someone he had underestimated for 12 years, and the most painful part was knowing she had never used that power against him, until he gave her a reason to stop protecting him. Naomi stood. Everyone else followed. Ethan remained seated for a moment, because he realized something terrifying. He had walked into the room expecting to decide what Naomi would leave with, but now he understood the truth. Naomi was the person deciding what happened next. The days after the meeting were quieter than Ethan expected. He had imagined anger. He had imagined Naomi celebrating her victory. He had imagined her using everything she had revealed to destroy him. But she did none of those things, and somehow that made it worse. Naomi simply continued with the process. She did not call his colleagues. She did not make public statements. She did not tell anyone what had happened at the restaurant or how he had treated her. She let the facts speak for themselves. Ethan struggled with that more than he wanted to admit, because he had expected revenge. Instead, he was forced to face something much harder: consequences. The first change came at his company. His promotion had placed him in a position he believed was secure. He had spent months building his reputation and preparing for a larger leadership role. Then the questions started. Executives began reviewing certain financial relationships connected to the company. Nothing happened overnight. No dramatic announcement. No public scandal. Just meetings, reviews. Careful decisions made by people who understood the numbers better than he did. Ethan quickly learned that his position was not as independent as he believed. The firm's growth had depended heavily on financial partnerships connected to Eastgate Holdings, the same group Naomi controlled. When those partnerships were reviewed, the company's leadership began reconsidering its plans, and Ethan's promotion became uncertain. He sat in his office one afternoon staring at an email from Human Resources. A meeting request, no explanation, just a time and date. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the same uncertainty Naomi had felt when he tried to make her feel powerless. But there was one difference. Naomi had never used uncertainty to hurt him. She had simply stopped carrying the weight for someone who no longer appreciated it. Meanwhile, Lena began pulling away. At first, Ethan refused to notice. He thought she was stressed. He thought she was giving him space. But then the calls became shorter. The messages became less frequent. The woman who had once told him he deserved a better life suddenly seemed less interested in the life he had left his marriage to pursue. One evening, Ethan confronted her. "You've been distant." Lena looked uncomfortable. I think things have become more complicated than I expected. Ethan stared at her. What does that mean? She sighed. When I thought you were moving forward, everything looked different. There it was, the truth he had ignored for so long. Lena had been attracted to the version of Ethan that looked successful. The title, the image, the future she imagined. Not necessarily the person underneath. Ethan wanted to argue, but he could not. Because he had done the same thing. He had valued Naomi differently when he thought she had nothing. The realization hurt because it was familiar. At home, Victoria was dealing with something she never expected. The family that once laughed at Naomi was no longer laughing. The video from the restaurant had spread again. But this time, people were not laughing at Naomi. They were questioning Ethan. They saw a successful-looking man humiliating his wife without knowing who she really was. Victoria stopped answering calls from relatives. The same people who once agreed with her began distancing themselves. Not because they suddenly became better people, because the truth had changed their opinion. And Victoria finally understood what Naomi had understood years earlier. People who only respect power are not truly respecting you. They are respecting what they think they can gain. Naomi, however, did not focus on their reactions. She focused on rebuilding her own life. She moved into a place that felt like hers, not because she needed to escape, because she wanted a space where every decision belonged to her. Her attorney continued handling the divorce process. The financial review moved forward carefully. There were no shortcuts, no dramatic destruction, only accountability. One evening, Ethan requested a private meeting. Naomi almost refused, but she agreed. They met in a quiet office. Ethan looked different, not because he had lost money, because he had lost certainty. I didn't know, he said. Naomi listened. I know. I thought you were unhappy with me because you didn't understand what I was trying to build. Naomi looked at him. No, Ethan. Her voice was calm. I understood exactly what you were building. He looked confused. Then why? Because somewhere along the way, you stopped building with me. The words stayed between them. Ethan lowered his eyes. For once, he had no defense. I made mistakes. Yes, Naomi said. But the biggest mistake was believing my value depended on whether you could see it. Ethan swallowed. Can we fix this? Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She remembered the man she married. She remembered the years before success changed him. But she also remembered the restaurant, the frozen card, the laughter, the divorce papers, the way he had looked at her when he believed she had nothing. I hope you become a better person, she said softly. His face changed. But I can't go back to being the person who needed to be hurt before she was respected. Ethan sat silently. He finally understood. Naomi had not won because she was richer. She had won because she had stopped accepting a place where she was constantly asked to prove her worth. As she left the meeting, Ethan remained alone. His phone rang moments later. It was his attorney. The voice on the other end sounded serious. Ethan, we received new information regarding the company review. Ethan straightened. What information? There was a pause. Then the answer came. The board has made a decision about your position, and for the first time Ethan realized the consequences of losing Naomi were only beginning. Months later, Naomi stood in front of the glass windows of her new office and watched the city move below her. The building belonged to Eastgate Holdings, but the view felt different now. For years, she had looked at success from a distance. She had helped build systems, supported decisions, and protected people who never knew how much she carried. Now, she no longer hid behind a quiet name or a simple lifestyle. Not because she needed recognition, because she finally understood that hiding had never protected her from being hurt. It had only allowed people to misunderstand her. The board had formally confirmed her position as majority shareholder and strategic owner of the financial group. The announcement was handled professionally, without drama or unnecessary attention. Naomi did not want public victory. She wanted a peaceful life. Ethan eventually accepted the outcome. His position at the company changed, but he was not destroyed. He was given the opportunity to continue his career elsewhere after the review was completed. Some relationships were repaired. Others were not. The hardest loss for him was not money. It was realizing that the person he had treated, As insignificant had been the person quietly standing beside him the entire time. He had spent years believing Naomi needed him. In reality, he had needed her more than he ever understood. Their divorce was finalized after months of careful discussions between attorneys. The prenup was reviewed, the financial matters were settled properly, and there was no dramatic courtroom battle. Naomi made sure everything was fair. That surprised Ethan. He had expected punishment. He had expected her to use her power the way he once used his, but Naomi refused. She did not want revenge, she wanted freedom. When Ethan asked to meet one final time, Naomi agreed. They sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant, not the place where he had humiliated her, somewhere ordinary, somewhere without an audience. "I keep thinking about that night," Ethan said. Naomi looked at him. "The restaurant?" He nodded. "I thought I was proving something." "You were." His expression changed. "What? That you were willing to hurt someone you claimed to love just to feel powerful." Ethan looked down. Once, he did not try to defend himself. "I was wrong about you." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "Yes, you were. I thought you had no ambition, no influence, no understanding of business, I know. I thought I was the one carrying everything." Naomi gave a small, sad smile. "You only saw what I allowed you to see." Those words stayed with him. Because they were true. But they were not an accusation. They were simply the reality of their marriage. Naomi had hidden her identity because she wanted to know if someone could love her without being impressed by what she owned. Ethan had failed that test. But Naomi had learned something too. She had spent years proving she could be patient, loyal, and supportive. She had forgotten that she deserved to be valued without having to prove anything at all. After that meeting, Naomi moved forward. She expanded her foundation. She spent more time making decisions that reflected who she truly was, not who people expected her to be. She also allowed herself to build relationships based on honesty. No more secrets, no more shrinking herself to make someone else comfortable. Ethan watched from a distance as Naomi became known not only as a powerful business leader, but as someone respected for her judgment and integrity. That was the part he struggled with most. Her success was never the reason he lost her. His own choices were. The woman he once underestimated had not changed into someone powerful. She had always been powerful. She had simply stopped hiding it. Years later, Naomi still remembered the moment her card was declined. Not because of the embarrassment, because of what came after. That was the moment she realized she could not control how others valued her. But she could control whether she continued accepting less than she deserved. Her wealth had opened doors. Her strength had kept her standing, and her peace was something no one could take away again. If you've ever been underestimated, share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what you would have done in Naomi's place.